Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone. And now, here is your host, the lovely, delightful, insightful, and all-around great gal, Ms. Barbara DeLong.
I have Ken Quiethawk to thank for that amazing intro, and if you want to hear his voice some more, his website is nativestorytellers.com. He is a native storyteller, and he is an amazing man. Also, I have Chris of Curious Times to thank for my guest tonight. I am so excited that I have so many wonderful people that are out there looking for magnificently wonderful people to pull on the show, and Chris gave me the name of tonight's guest, Robert Snow. He served for 38 years at the Indianapolis Police Department, retiring in 2007 with the rank of captain. And while at the police department, he served in such capacities as police department executive officer, captain of detectives, and commander of the Homicide Branch. He's also been a publishing writer for over 30 years, and he's had over 100 articles and short stories published in magazines like Playboy, Reader's Digest, the National Enquirer, quite a span there, The Writer, Police, the Saint Detective Magazine, and others. In addition, he's had 15 books published. Almost all of Captain Snow's published works were written so that the readers could use his knowledge of law enforcement to better protect themselves and their loved ones. He does have one book, however, that sort of stands out from all the rest. And that's the book we're going to be talking about tonight, and that's Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, and that tells the fascinating story of his transformation from skeptic to believer. As a veteran police detective, he, was devoted to evidence and hard facts. He'd never given any thought to reincarnation, but during a hypnotic regression, he experienced a vivid awareness of being alive in 3 separate historical scenes. Remaining skeptical, he began to investigate with the intention of disproving reincarnation, and instead, diligent research and collaboration from multiple sources revealed solid evidence that he indeed had lived a former life as Carroll Beckwith, a 19th-century American artist. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and I tell people all the time that the very best converts are the skeptics, because it takes a ton of material to get them to admit that there are possibilities out there that they had not considered before.
Well, I was one of the biggest, before I started my investigation, I was one of the biggest of skeptics. I thought reincarnation was just something that people believed in, so they wouldn't have to feel bad about their life. They could always blame it on karma from a past life type thing. And I believe, again, it was just wishful thinking. People who didn't want to think that we die, that's it. They wanted to think that the things carry on. So I didn't give it any credence at all before I started this investigation.
Well, it is a big leap for people to take, for sure. And I know that a lot of people, don't believe in reincarnation, and lots of people think, you live one life and that's it, and, that's it. However, I do believe in reincarnation. I always have, and not necessarily, to blame junk in this life on that life, but every now and then I just say, you know what, I'm going to roll over all of the karmic debt I've accumulated to the next life. I'll never know what hit me anyhow. So, there's that different philosophy. But being a police officer, I mean, that's pretty hardcore stuff. And but didn't you, though, from time to time sort of stick a big toe in the water and ask other police officers what they felt about the paranormal, the metaphysical, or reincarnation, and weren't you surprised at what you got from them?
Yeah, well, actually, before I sidebite this book, after I had my regression and investigated, I really still wasn't ready to write the book. I mean, being a police captain, this is not something police captains publicly talk about. You don't talk about New Age type things like this, especially don't talk about believing them or have proof of them. So before I published the book, I started doing a little just very, very casual interviewing around the police department to see how many other officers might have had any kind of experience. And I was kind of surprised at how many police officers have had paranormal experiences. I talked to a number of officers who've had out-of-body experiences. Interesting enough, it was always during a moment of intense stress. Just a really tense moment, they'd have an out-of-body experience. But the difference being, I talked to a lot of officers. I talked to officers and other types of paranormal experiences. But the difference being, they would talk to me and other officers, but they wouldn't talk to anyone else. In other words, this was an in-family type thing, in-house in-family type thing. So they would tell me, but they wouldn't tell anyone else, because they might think, well, gee, this guy's a little bit off. He slipped a couple of gears here, and that's what people might think, So most policemen, they will tell another policeman but they won't admit to anyone else outside of police work.
Well, I can understand that. When you think about everybody's belief or the archetype of a police officer, especially a homicide detective or whatever, you get sturdy, down to earth people who are not easily shaken by anything, and so you tend to put your trust into them because of that. And
and police officers, you're trained to look for physical, hard evidence that you can actually put your hands on, you can present to a court of law and get it confident. So this kind of thing, to actually prove something like this, is extremely difficult. It took me over 2 years before I was able to confirm what I had seen during the regression, because the facts, again, the person lived back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and record keeping, as you're aware, even before computer time, is sketchy at best. It took me a little over 2 years to actually get it, confirm all the facts I'd seen.
Well, I know you made. Well, let's go back to the beginning here, though. Let's start everybody off from. I've read the book, so I know all you went through. But how did this come about that you even considered doing a past life regression?
I never would have taken it, but I belong to being a police officer for 38 years. Actually, I never really wanted to be a police officer. When I was growing up, I thought it never really occurred to me. The only thing I've ever wanted to be since my youngest days, 4 or 5 years old, remember, I've always wanted to be a writer. That's all I ever wanted to be. If anybody asked me, I want to be a writer. But anybody knows anything about being a writer, starting off, being a writer and living indoors are not necessarily synonymous. Writing doesn't pay much, especially at first, and so you have to have another job. And I was in the military during the Vietnam War when I was discharged after 4 years, and when I got out, my brother was a police officer in Indianapolis, and I was looking for a job, and he said, hey, they're hiring it because, it was during the Vietnam War, so they were short on officers. So I thought, well, why not? It's a fairly good paying job and steady. So I went down and I applied and I joined, and it turned out to be a very fortuitous decision, because not only to have a job that paid money, it kept me supported, but it gave me tons of materials to write about. Almost every bit of thing I've written about, all my books, my articles and short stories are all about police work. And so it was really a fortuitous idea. But anyway, being a writer, besides being a writer, you also have to be a reader. You can't, when you're a writer, you have to be a reader. You have to read everything from every different field, because you need to see if you see something, how a writer did something really well, you want to study it so you do the same. You can do the same. Or if they did something poorly, see what they did so you don't. So anyway, I read a lot of books, and one of the books I read, I used to order every kind of book to see, was a book called Coming Back by Dr. Raymond Moody. Dr. Moody had previously done a investigation of near-death experiences, and he had a friend who was a psychologist who did past life regression therapy, which is basically hypnotizing people and supposedly take them to a past life to sort out problems in this life. But anyway, he had his friend, and she talked him into being hypnotized and supposedly take back to past lives. So he did it, and he wrote, and so he did it, and he went back to 8 past lives, and so he wrote his book about it. It's a very well written, very interesting book. But it's kind of funny. At the end of the book, he kind of hedges and says, "Yeah, I don't really know what this was. I don't know if this is really true or it's my imagination." And that's kind of how I felt. But anyway, after this, a few months later, I was at a party, and I was talking to a lady who's a psychologist at the Indianapolis Police Department. And we were talking, just making casual stuff about movies we'd seen and books we read. And I said, "Remember this book?" And I told her about this book, and she wanted to know what I thought about it. Now, at this moment, I didn't know that the psychologist, she actually used past life regression therapy herself. And I kind of made fun of it. It's kind of late in the party. I've been drinking, and probably got a little obnoxious. I'm making fun of past life regression, how silly I thought the whole concept of past lives and reincarnation was. Well, I got down to the point, I got irritated enough that she basically dared me, she dared me to try it to see if I thought it was so foolish. And at first I said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it." But then it got to the point, she said, "Oh, you're scared." Nah, you don't want to ask a man if he's scared, especially you've been at a party, been drinking. So I eventually agreed. I said, "Well, I'll do it to show you that it's just stupid." Well, then the next day, being a little more clear-headed, I said, "I ain't doing that. I'm not doing it." But it seems like after this, I would run to this psychologist every day. Before this time, I didn't see her every couple of months, but it seemed like I'd run to her every day, and then she'd always ask me, "Have you made the appointment yet?" She had given me a card with the name of a colleague of hers who did past life regression that I was supposed to call. And, I got to the point where I'd see her, like, "Oh, God, there she is again," down the hall. And you're about to make up some flimsy, feeble excuse. So finally, after enough times, I got tired of it, and I just said, well, I got kind of irritated. I thought, well, I made this, so I called, made the appointment, and I talked to the lady about coming. I was going, and she said, "Yeah, I can bring my own tape recorder." So what I was going to do, I was going to go to the session, cooperate 100% with this lady, bring a tape recorder along, record the session, and show my psychologist at the police department how silly all this was, how foolish it was. And that's basically how I got talked into doing a past life regression.
Well, I think one of the interesting things, and you describe the entire process meticulously in your book. And one of the things that I think it's important for a lot of people to understand is you are consciously aware that you are consciously aware. It's not you kind of are talking to yourself, this can't be, this is silly, this is foolish, this is what, I can feel my hands cramping, I can feel the rest of me cramping, I'm not hypnotized. And then suddenly you realize that there was a different kind of awareness that you were in.
Yeah, Dr. Griffith, the lady who did the hypnotism on me, we went through probably 20, 25 minutes. She employed a lot of imagery in her hypnosis, a lot of imagery. And I had made the decision before I went there, I was going to cooperate 100% with her, do everything she asked me to do, so I could go back and later and show the police department psychologist how silly it was. So anyway, we went through about 20 minutes at least, maybe longer, of a lot of imagery. Describe this, describe that, a lot of imagery. And it is funny because I was cooperating, and I kept thinking to myself how silly this was. I thought, what an idiot I am for coming. Here, I'm just sitting here. I felt kind of foolish because I really didn't think I could be hypnotized. To tell you the truth, I thought I was too strong, but obviously I wasn't. But suddenly during this thing, we were part of the thing. She was counting steps for me to walk down steps. So, she'd count backwards, and she'd doing the psychology thing, 10, 9, this long numbers thing. And I'm thinking, at the moment, I'm almost laughing. I'm thinking how silly this is. When she got to 1, it was I was in a valley, and it wasn't I just want to imagine I was in a valley or a daydream. I was in a valley. Now I knew I was also sitting on the couch. I could feel the couch under my buttocks. I could feel my sitting on the couch. I could feel my hands folded in my lap. I knew I was still in the room, but at the same time I was in the valley, and it was so vividly. It was as vividly clear as I felt. I'd open my eyes and look around the office. It was just as clear as that. And the interesting part was, I noticed when I was in this valley, it was real heavily forest, and I could see the leaves moving on the trees, and I could feel a breeze in my face. Now, at the moment, I thought that's just the air conditioning in the office, all it is. Now, I knew right then. I mean, I knew I wasn't real stupid. I realized right then I'd been hypnotized. I realized, okay, you're not as strong as you thought, Bob. You had been hypnotized. But what struck me more about anything was just how the clarity of it. It was. I mean, I could look at leaves. I could see the veins in the leaves as I walked along this valley. As if you could see everything vividly clear. Now, to me, that was what I thought at the moment. This is like, if you go to Disney World or some big amusement park, they have some really wonderful rides that are tremendously realistic. They're not, but you know you're not. I mean, the ride itself is very realistic. It's what's happening, but you know it's not real. And that's what I thought this was. I thought this is tremendously realistic. I couldn't believe how clear it was, but I knew it was just my subconscious mind dredging up old memories and reordering them, to make a story. And that's all I thought it was at the time. But So Dr. Griffith and I went through a couple of different lives, until we finally got to the one that the problem was the first couple of lives, two of them were so far back in history you couldn't confirm either. There was no records or anything.
Tell everybody what she asked you to look at your feet in the first one.
Well, in the very first one, I didn't realize till I later on, when I got home and listened to the tape again, she told me, I want you to go back to the very first life you lived on Earth. Now, I didn't remember her at the moment when it happened. I didn't remember her saying that, but I heard it on my tape later on. Well, when the very first set the life I went into, I looked down. I was wearing fur. And I was wearing fur, and I was carrying part of a tree limb in my hand. Now, I knew what this was. Everybody knows what cavemen look like. Everybody's seen movies and all and TV programs about cavemen. I knew what this was. And so I described it to her. I was really a dirty, there's some really dirty matted, fur, and I was, barefooted, and I was carrying a piece of a tree limb in my hand. And again, at the time, I thought, what this was? I thought this was the most amazing amusement park ride I've ever been on. I mean, I really did. I thought this was, because it was fun. It truly was. I didn't think it was true. I didn't think there was any validity to it. I thought it was just old memories or old movies and program I'd seen. And so I thought it was cool. I was enjoying it, only because it was so vivid and so realistic. And I described her. I was a cave, and I told her I lived in a cave up on the hill. And so she asked me to go to the cave. And the funny thing is, like I said, I walked in the cave, and I could smell. And it was really odd because this guy was not very hygienic. It was an awful, disgusting smell. I walked into the cave. Now, you're thinking, I knew I'm still sitting on the couch. I can still hear Dr. Griffith moving the chair next to me, and I can hear the noise on the street outside. But I'm in this cave, and I could smell. And then for a minute, I thought, where could that come from? You couldn't. You understand? Because I could actually smell it. It was, again, this guy was not terribly hygienic.
Well, there wasn't antiseptic then either. So.
Yeah.
So she took you to your moment of death.
Yeah, she took me to my death, and interesting enough, at the first part of the regression, I was in this person's body, and she said, "Go to his death," and I found myself, I wasn't in the body long, I was floating above the body, looking down on it. I could see the body, and then she started, I described what it looked like, a little skinny little guy covered in fur, and he was coughing real hard and shivering. He was dying. I don't know what he was dying of, but it looked pretty painful. So we went out. She said, "Go out in the valley." So I went out in the valley, and she said, "Look up. Do you see a light?" And there was a bright light above the valley. And she says, then first thing she says, "What did you learn about this life?" And I told her it was a bad life. It was because I was alone. I said, "I've never had anybody in this life. It was a really bad life to be alone." I don't know. Again, the funny thing is, when you're under hypnosis like this in regression, you start saying things before you know you're going to say them. I mean, in regular conversation, you always have a split second to think what you're going to say before you say it. In this case, I was saying things before I knew I was going to say them. They just kind of blurred out my mouth. And I said, "This is a bad life," because I was alone, didn't have anyone. So she told me, she said, "Okay," says, "Go into the light. I want you to go to a life that you did have someone." So I see myself going to the light, and there'd be 3 or 4 seconds of just like gray fog. You couldn't see anything. And the next thing I come out, and I was walking along a sidewalk. It was a large city, Interesting enough, it was a real sunny day, and I could feel the sun beating down on me, which was really odd because I was sitting in a really darkened office. But I was walking, but I could look around. I could see this wasn't present day because there were horse-drawn carriages and gas lights on the street. So I figured it was probably the late 1800s. So she asked me to describe. I described what I was wearing and all that. And she asked me where I was going. I told her I was going to meet a woman. So she said, okay, go, meet a woman. Where do you go? And I told her, we went to an outdoor cafe. And I'm describing the whole experience. She ordered some kind of special water, and I ordered a glass of wine. And then she kept going on to, going different scenes in your life, of this life. We went to very, different scenes of this life and all. And the next scene was I was arguing in a hallway with a woman who was apparently my wife. We was having a really, I don't know what the argument was about, but it was a pretty vigorous argument. And I just got mad and stormed away. And I went to a room, and it was an artist studio. And there were there was dozens of paintings hanging on the wall. And above me was a skylight, and on one side of the wall was all wall windows. And suddenly, again, I knew, and again, I didn't know if Bob Snow didn't know this, but the person's body I was occupying at the time knew this is where I worked, that I was an artist, and this is where I worked. And, again, and at the time I thought, again, I'm again thinking this is movies or books or TV is all it is, but I've never had any talent in art at all, the slightest bit. But the person's body I was having was definitely an artist. Well, in this life, she finally told me, she said, okay, go to your death. She says, go to your death and tell me what you regret about this life. And I told her that I regret my wife and I didn't have any children because my wife couldn't have children. And again, I didn't know who I was talking about, who this guy was. I just kind of told her, just kind of come out of my mouth before I knew it was going to come out. Well, then I saw myself rise out of the body and go through the ceiling. But then I didn't find this terribly amazing. Everybody's seen ghost stories. Of course, ghosts can do that. They come out of the body and go through the roof of this the room I was in. And now suddenly I was over a huge city. It was lights to the horizon. I was over a huge city. Well, the funny thing is, Dr. Griffith said, okay, now go back to the light. Now, people always think when you're under hypnosis, you're under control of hypnosis. That's not really true. I knew exactly what was going on and what to do and what not to do. I mean, you always see these things where people get you up on stage, make you cluck like a chicken. Under hypnosis, you still know everything. It's not true. You know what's going on because she told me, she says, all right, go into the light. But I didn't. I saw myself flying through some woods, and I could tell it would look like fall. It looked like a cold, crisp night, but the trees still had their leaves. So anyway, next thing I know, I'm looking in the second or third story of this mansion, and there's a painting over a fireplace. There's a real roaring fire in the fireplace, but the room's empty, but there's a fire in the picture. And she kept telling me, she said, go to the light. I said, and I wouldn't do it. I had something I wanted to do first. So I went there, and I finally told her I wanted to see one of my paintings. Before I left the earth, I wanted to see one of my paintings. And it was a painting of a still life over the fireplace. And so, but then after that, I went to the light, and this is the funny, but she told me, okay, she said, now go to your life when you were a female. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, that's going to happen. But it did. But it did. And the next life was as a Greek altar girl, and of course back in ancient Greece. But it's one of these things where this is so far, but like the caveman, there's no way you could verify this one way or the other type thing. It was back, a couple thousand years ago. But interesting enough, this one, when she took my death, I was in a fishing village, and I got caught in a net while I was fishing, and I drowned. And as I was feeling this, I could taste salt water. And I thought, how bizarre that was, that I could actually taste salt water as I was drowning. Fortunately, Dr. Griffith got me out of it pretty fast because that's a pretty traumatic thing to see you to experience yourself dying. Oh, yeah. Well, so anyway, then she told me, she says, okay, I want you to go to your most recent life before Bob Snow. Go back to the life you were before you were Bob Snow. So I said, okay. So it was about 3 or 4 seconds of gray fog. Then I was back in the body of the artist again. I recognized it was the same person. And at that time I was in my studio, and I'm painting a portrait. But interesting enough, the portrait is of a hunchback woman, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, I'm actually painting of a hunchback woman's portrait. And the thing is, I'm just finishing the portrait. The regression is so clear, I can see every brush stroke in this painting. And I'm just finishing the painting. And I remember looking at the painting and looking at her and thinking, wow, wow. But again, I didn't think it was anything. Again, I think I've seen this painting somewhere in this life, Somewhere I've seen it, and my subconscious mind just regurgitating this stuff to make it look like I'm doing it. Well, Dr. Griffith took me to a couple more instances in the artist's life, and anyway, every time she says go 5 years forward, go 5 years forward. Well, anyway, one of the times she told me, she said go 5 years forward. Okay, so I'm in kind of the gray fog in between lives, and all of a sudden I blurted out, she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. Now, I had no idea who I was talking about, but I knew it was obviously somebody very, very important to this person's body, this person's artist, because all of a sudden I felt like I wanted to cry. I could feel tears. I could feel myself welling up like I wanted to cry. And I had no idea who I was talking about, but whoever this woman is that died of a blood clot was very important to him. Then right after that, the tape recorder I'd taken with me clicked off suddenly, and I opened my eyes, and then it was over. That was it.
Uh-huh.
It was kind of funny because now I'm feeling kind of foolish because I'd gone there so sure of myself, so sure that nothing would happen. I was really flustered. I didn't know what to do after it was over. I mean, it'd been so vivid, so realistic. I knew it wasn't. I was certain it wasn't true, but obviously it surprised me for what happened. I could see at that moment why people would believe it was true. I could understand how a person less gullible than me would believe this was a true life, being so vivid. But anyway, Dr. Griffith asked me, what are you going, what did you learn from these lives that applied to your life? And I could, I was just wanting to get out of there. Is all. I just mumbled something about it. I needed time to think about it and all. And the road, and I got out of there real fast. And then I got out and I sat in my car for a while out in the parking lot, and I kept thinking about what I'd just seen during this. And the problem was what I saw. The problem was the clarity of it. I couldn't imagine where these memories had come from. They'd be so clear, so vivid. And so basically, I finally, after I sat there probably half hour in my car trying to sort this out because it was really bugging me because I couldn't imagine having these kind of memories this clear, but they weren't memories that I could recall in my conscious mind. So obviously they were somewhere buried deep in my subconscious. So, and I just, finally I kept telling myself, Bob, let it go. Just forget about it. It's just subconscious memories. That you've seen it, you forgot it, and now you brought it back up. It's all. And I kept trying to tell myself that just forget about it. But I found in the days in the days after this, I couldn't stop thinking about this. I just simply, I would think about it 50 times a day about the regression. And interesting enough, during the first couple of years after the regression, if I closed my eyes, I could still see the paintings, both of them. I could see clear, especially the painting of the hunchback woman. I could see I could close my eyes and see every brush stroke in that painting. And it just bugged me. It started bugging me because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd think about it all the time. Every day I'd think about it constantly. And it started bugging me. After a month or so, it started bugging me because, as a police officer, I've dealt with people who have serious obsessions before. And believe me, it seldom turns out well for the person who's having the obsession. Having really deep obsessions seldom turns out good for you. And so it got me worried about this is really got a grip on me. So I decided, what I need to do, I need to find the still life I saw over the fireplace in the mansion or the picture of hunchback woman. I need to find them. Once I find them, I'll remember. I saw that 5 years, 10 years ago. And I'll remember where I saw that. So my idea was, now this occurred in 1992 before the internet. And so in those days you couldn't just pull up a search engine and type in hunchback woman painting and get some results. In those days, when you did research, you had to go to the library and pull books off the shelf. So my idea was to go to the Indianapolis Public Library and go through the art section, start pulling art books off the shelf until I found one of these paintings. I figured they had to be at least semi-famous because I'm not much of an art fan. I don't know very much about art at all. I've never been a big fan of art or anything, so I figured they had to be famous for me to see them and remember them. And so my plan was to go through the books till I found one. I figured that would snap to it. There it is. Case closed. I saw it, 10 years ago. There is nothing supernatural or otherworldly about this. But unfortunately, I found a really distressing fact. The Indianapolis Public Library has hundreds, not dozens, but hundreds of art books. And it took me several months, and I went through every single one of them. But I finally did, and I didn't find the paintings. Now, that started really bugging me. That started bugging me because come on now, these got to be famous. Got to. So what I said then, I started visiting bookstores around the area, Borders and Barnes & Noble and what have you. I figured they'd have newer art books. Again, trying to find the paintings. But I couldn't. They weren't there. They simply weren't there. So then I thought, I'm not one to give up easy. Part of detective work, people don't realize this. You know, on TV, always looks great. You're chasing people and shooting out. Now, most of your detective work is done through hard work, drudgery type work of sorting through facts, looking through reams of documents to find the evidence you want. And this is what this is one of these. So what I decided to do then, I started visiting some art galleries around the area and described the paintings to them to see if they, you know, I figured, come on, how many paintings of Hunchback Woman could there be? I mean, that would have to be I thought that had to be fairly unique, wouldn't it? But I found something really interesting. In those days, before the internet, there was no central listing of paintings. Yeah, in other words, you couldn't just say I want a so and so painting. You know, as you might say, it's at this gallery here. You had to just start calling art dealers and see if they knew where it was at. So I visited probably a half dozen galleries, and all of them told me the same thing. They didn't know. They never heard the Hunchback Woman painting, number one. And number two, that the only way I could find out is to start calling art galleries around the United States. So finally, wow. Because let me tell you, when I was in charge of the Homicide Branch, I was in charge of homicide for a number of years in Indianapolis, and we had an 83% clearance rate, which is really outstanding for a city of our size. But that still means that 17% of our murders every year went unsolved, and so we have cases we simply can't solve. And what we do with those, you simply deactivate them, put them on the shelf, and then you don't work them anymore unless you get new evidence. And I figured that's what's going to happen in this case. I mean, I couldn't think of anything else to do. What else I could do to try and find the paintings? And so I finally decided I'll just forget about the case. I'll just put it on the shelf. I said, just Bob, you don't think about it anymore. Of course, that's always a nice thing to say. It didn't work, so because I kept thinking about it constantly.
Yes,
but I couldn't think of any other avenue.
Yes, it's sort of like telling someone not to think about puppies.
Yeah. I simply couldn't think of anything else to do. So I basically just couldn't do anything. I decided to let it go. And so finally, after a couple, I just didn't do anything, but I kept thinking about it. Finally, a couple of months later, it was coming toward to my wife and I's anniversary, and we were wanting to go on a trip somewhere we haven't been before. So she called me one day at the office and said, hey, what do you think about New Orleans? And neither of us had ever been to New Orleans. We thought, hell, why not? It'd be kind of a fun trip, right? Our anniversary is in late April, so it'd be nice down there before college students and before the mosquitoes probably. So we made plans to go to New Orleans, and we spent a week there and had a great time. My wife's a real history buff, and if you go to New Orleans, everywhere you turn, you can't throw a rock without hitting something historical. So it was So we visited all kind of plantations and battlefields and all kinds of stuff. Anyway. We also, at nighttime, of course, we go in the French Quarter and listen to the band, go to visit the bars, listen to the bands. But I noticed as we go in there every night, there are a lot of really interesting stores in the French Quarter that, memorabilia stores, antique stores, but they are always closed when we went late at night with the bars. So the last day we were there, our plane didn't leave till evening, so we had all day left. And I suggested that we go window shopping in the French Quarter that day. My wife thought it was a good idea, so we did. We went visit a lot of stores, and we finally got to Royal Street. In the early 1990s, Royal Street in New Orleans was all art galleries. And so we started visiting the looking art galleries and had some magnificent paintings and some of these beautiful artwork. But I noticed as we're walking down the street going to art gallery, the art galleries are getting smaller and the paintings more obscure. Well, anyway, we finally got down to an art gallery at the end of the street in Royal Street and walk in. It's two stories, and it said modern art upstairs. My wife's always a fan of modern art. I never have been. So she goes upstairs, and I just start walking along the first floor, and I'm looking at the paintings. I don't recognize any artists. Again, I don't recognize the paintings or any of the artists. None of them are world masterpieces or famous paintings. Or so I'm just walking along looking. So I get to the corner, and there's a portrait on an easel. And I walk by, and I give it a glance, and I walk, and I stop like I'd run to a glass wall. And I turn around. It was the portrait of the Hunchback Woman. Now, let me tell you, as a police officer of 38 years, I've been scared a lot. There's lots of times, and don't kid yourself, police work is scary. Police work can be very, don't care who you think you are, how brave you are. Police work can be scary. But the difference is, in police work, when you run into scary situations, you have training and experience. You know the best actions to take and what the person's response is going to be, so you don't feel it's quite as bad. In this case, I had no experience, no training. I was stunned and frightened because I had no idea of what was going on. What are the odds that the painting I saw in regression, I searched for months, which suddenly I just stumbled onto accident in a art gallery 1,000 miles from my home. Come on, the odds are just tremendous. And so I'm standing looking at this painting. And at first I told myself, no, Bob, this looks like the painting. It's it. It's close. It's not the real painting. That's all it is. But the thing is, I closed my eyes, and again, in those days, I could still see. I could see every brush stroke of the painting. I'd open my eyes, and it was the painting. There's no doubt it was the painting. So then I start feeling with the idea, maybe I'm not really there. Maybe I'm in a nursing home somewhere. I'm in a nursing home in a bed with a tube. Well, I was struggling. Come on, there's got to be some concrete, rational explanation for this. These things may happen in the movies. They may happen on TV. They don't happen in real life. Things like this do not happen in real life. That's what I kept telling myself. Things like this do not. They may happen on the X-Files or on some science fiction movie. They don't happen in real life. And I didn't know what to do. I'm staring at this painting. I mean, what do you do? I mean, it was so surrealistic. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there and looked at it and kept looking at it. And I kept trying to find one reasonable explanation, some rational explanation for how this could be here, how I could be seeing this, but I couldn't come up with one. Anyway, I was probably standing there maybe 5 minutes when one of the salesmen apparently thought, hot dog, I got a customer here. So he came over and he says, I bet you think how nice I'd look over your fireplace. Maybe at the moment I thought, yeah, I want a picture of a hunchback woman on over my fireplace.
Right.
So, and I remember correctly, I remember the price tag I make was $5,000 at that time.
Oh my
of course,
gosh.
Paintings are like used cars. The price tag don't really. It's room negotiation, but still, I was still convinced. Even though this was amazingly bizarre to find this thing, I was still convinced I had seen it somewhere in this life. Because people have asked me later on, why didn't they buy it? Why did I buy the painting when I was there? Simply because I still believed I had seen it somewhere in life. I wouldn't go and spend $4,000 or $5,000 for a picture of a hunchback woman. Then get home and say, "Oh yeah, I saw this 10 years ago somewhere." And my wife would have killed me, and I wouldn't blame her. And that's why I didn't buy it. But anyway, I told the salesman, I said, "Say, I don't recognize the artist. Who's the artist?" He said, "Hang on a second, I got a little bio over here." So he went over to the desk and pulled out. He had a piece of just an 8x11 piece of paper, had a little small paragraph on it, and said the man's name was James Carroll Beckwith. And the thing is, I started reading the biography, and it's just kind of gripped me, and kind of like a claw in my chest, because I noticed 5 different things on the biography that I had seen during the regression, and that it's like whoa. But then I thought, Bob, hang on, Bob. If you've seen this painting somewhere, you probably saw a little bio of the artist along with the painting, and that's all it is. This is nothing otherworldly or supernatural. If you've seen this painting somewhere in this life, you saw a little bio, and that's why the 5 things match. That's all there is to it. So anyway, I wrote down the information, date of birth, date of death, and the information about him and his name, James Carroll Beckwith. And I thought, well, now this case I put on the shelf can be reactivated. I have new evidence. I know who the artist is. I'll go back to Indianapolis. I'll research James Carroll Beckwith. Then I'll know exactly where this all came from. I'll know where all these memories come from. It's nothing, otherworldly or supernatural. It'll all be rationally explained. So anyway, we got back to Indianapolis. So the next morning, I went back to the library, and I found kind of interesting fact that James Carroll Beckwith was not a very famous painter at all. He really wasn't, because in the art books, in small art books, he was not mentioned at all. He in some large art reference books, he'd have maybe a few sentences about him. He was apparently simply did mostly portraits during his life. He lived in New York City in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he did mostly portraits, but nothing outstanding, nothing world class, nothing anybody had ever recognized. And I thought it was kind of bizarre. I thought, that's this. How could I know this stuff about this guy if he's so, when would I have seen him? He is so commonplace and so unremarkable. How did I know about him? So the lady at the librarian told me, says, "I tell you what you need to do." Says, "Go up to the art museum library. We have an art museum in North Side of Indianapolis, so they have a much bigger art reference library." So I thought it was a good idea. So I left and drove up to the art museum and went to the library, and the lady there was extremely helpful, and she found some more references to Beckwith. She found about 5, some more references to him. And interesting enough, each one was a confirmation of things I'd seen. Nothing huge in itself, nothing huge, but each one more confirmation of something I'd seen. But the thing that really startled me up at the library, there was a book about John Singer Sargent, one of our very famous American painters, probably, next to Whistler, probably the most famous American painter. But anyway, and the little incident about Beckwith, at the bottom of the footnote said, "This information came from the diaries of James Carroll Beckwith, now on file at the National Academy of Design, New York City." So right then I thought, well, there's a source. Because again, she didn't have very much at the public library either. The only thing, there was kind of one thing that came up was really kind of funny. She said, well, I got a folder on an exhibition of Beckwith's work that was held out here in Indianapolis. And for a few seconds, all of a sudden my heart leaped. My chest said, yes, I knew it. There was an exhibition of Beckwith's work here in Indianapolis, and that's where I saw that. Unfortunately, the exhibition was in 1911. And that was the last time he had one. That was the last time he had one here. Again, he wasn't big enough to have any new ones. So anyway, so I went home. I researched it and found the address of the National Enquirer Design, and I wrote him a letter and told him I was researching James Carroll Beckwith. I didn't say why, but I told him I was researching James Carroll Beckwith, and that I understand they had his diaries. Is it possible to view them? Well, a week or two later, I got a letter back that the diaries are extremely fragile. Nobody can handle them, but they had microfilm made of them. And if I went to the Archives of American Art at Smithsonian, I could get microfilms of the diary. And so I thought, well, I need to look at this. Come on, maybe something will explain where this all come from. So I ordered the microfilm, and they said it'd be about a week or so to get there. So during that week, I sit down and I got my tape out of the regression, and I sit down and wrote down every fact I had said about Beckwith that could be proved. And I found I had 28 different facts that could be proved or disproved about Beckwith. So I wrote them down to know what to look for in the diaries. But actually, tell you what truth that what I was really looking for at this time wasn't confirmation. I already had about 10 really small, minor confirmations. But what I was really looking for, I wanted to find the disproving fact. In other words, I wanted to find, for example, I had said, she asked me, Dr. Griffith asked me, what do you regret with this life? And I said, I regret we didn't have children because my wife couldn't have children. Well, if he had kids, then this is not true. If I could find something about Beckwith's life that wasn't true, then this is not a real memory. This is some kind of mishmash thing. I mean, I still don't know what it was, but it's not a real memory. It's not a past life or a real memory. So my idea about getting the diaries was to find one really good fact I'd said about him. For example, if no woman important to him had died of a blood clot, then this is not a real life. This is not real. This is not real. This is some kind of mishmash of my memories messed up. That's all there is to it. So anyway, I finally got the diaries came at the end of the week, but I found this really distressing fact. Beckwith started his diary at age 19, and he was very, very faithful about putting it. He kept a diary till the day before his death at age 65. There were 17,000 pages of diary. Now, you think, well, what do you do now? So finally, I didn't know what to do. Well, then I found out that including the diaries was his autobiography. I thought, great, that'd be even better. He had his autobiography. Unfortunately, he started in the spring of 1917, and when he was pretty ill, and he died in the fall, and he only got 21 pages done, which didn't try. And they were all about his youth, so it didn't really help. It didn't really help at all. So what I decided to do was just kind of thumb through the diaries and see if I could find anything. And just kind of maybe just take a quick look at the different spools and see if I could find anything. And I was looking again, I looked at the one disproving fact. For example, I saw him order a glass of wine at the outdoor cafe in New York when he's meeting a woman. So I thought, well, if he's a teetotaler, then or he doesn't, suppose he only drinks whiskey, then the least might be the disproving fact. So I found for some reason, I don't know why, he excerpted part of his diary and typed it, just about a few pages of it. And he was talking about, and he was actually he studied art in Paris for 5 years. And as a matter of fact, he was roommates with John Singer Sargent, the famous painter. They were roommates while they both went to the same art school. Anyway, he exerted this part of his diary about a summer. When he's out of school, he just kind of tramped around Europe. He was talking about living in Venice and how he lived on burnt eggs and wine. And again, you think, hell, that didn't work. So anyway, after I couldn't really find, I never could find, when I was just going through the diaries, I never could find the disproving fact. The one fact I wanted to find that would disprove it. So what I finally did after I kept looking through them, I actually had a hard copy made of the diary. I figured that's the only way, because you could only keep this microfilm for 2 weeks, and you had to work down at the library, and to make copies was a real pain those days. When they didn't have the other, it was a pain making them. So anyway, I had hard copy made of the diary, and I sit down, and it took me over a year. I read every single page of it, read every page of his diary, And
wow.
like I said, after a while, I just kept finding, again, like I said, for example, did he? I thought, well, did he paint the portrait of the hunchback woman? Now, if you can't find, now surely this would be big enough in your life. There'll be some mention of your diary, and sure enough, in the diary of 1912, he has 3 different mentions about painting a hunchback woman. And interesting enough, he describes his artist studio where he was doing it at, and he described it as being a long room full of paintings, a skylight above, and a wall of windows, which was exactly the same thing I saw. And
yeah.
it's one of those things. It's like, hello. It kept going. Kept getting. You kept finding these things that nothing. I couldn't find to disprove it. Then I kept thinking, well, I got to find the one major thing, like the not having children. Well, I got to his diary. I got into October 24th, 1888, and it turned out his wife had a very serious miscarriage that day, and because of that, they could never have children. And it's interesting because in his diary he mentions how he wanted children so bad, but his wife couldn't. They didn't have children because his wife couldn't have children. Now, by that time, I had gotten to probably number 18 or 19 on my list of 28, and every one had been confirmed. And I wasn't sure what to do. I was still flustered. So finally, though, when I got to December 5th, 1886, he makes a mention in his diary about his mother. Now, I told you when I said about I said a woman died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. I knew there were, reading about Beckwith's diary, there were only 2 women who were so really important to his life. His wife, Bertha, who he loved dearly. They were married till he died, and his mother. His mother he loved dearly. His dad was a wholesale grocer in Chicago, and he did not approve of Beckwith wasn't being an artist. He told him that's the best way he knew of starving to death. He wanted Beckwith to go into the wholesale grocery business. Beckwith wanted to be an artist. Well, so his dad did not approve at all. Well, his mother bought him his first paints, his first easel and brushes, and she encouraged him. I mean, he dearly loved his mother. So anyway, in his diary on December 5th, 1886, he talked about his mother being in church and dying of a stroke caused by a blood clot. I think that was probably the fact that pushed me over the edge type thing. Where now, come on, you can see a lot. You might see a painting and see a bio. They're not going to tell you what his mother died of. They're simply not going to do that. I mean, there's some facts that are so obscure. And again, about a person's life, you could make guesses about a person's life, and you'd probably get half dozen right about a person. You can't get 28 right. You simply cannot get 28 facts right, and not miss a single one. But I think the blood clot thing finally just pushed me over after, because then it finally did end up confirming all 28 facts. So the problem was not so much I confirmed it. Okay, this is obviously a real life. This is obviously James Carroll Beckwith's life I saw. But the problem wasn't that accepting that. My problem was accepting what it meant. Because what it meant was that my worldview, the worldview I'd held my whole life, was wrong. I mean, come on, you have a worldview in your mind about how the world works and how things operate, and you realize you've been wrong. And the people you kind of snickered and rolled your eyes at all the time, who you believe in reincarnation, what have you, they were right and you were wrong. And that would, to tell you the truth, that was the hardest part for me. This whole thing was finally being able to accept what it meant. What does it mean to my life to accept this is true? Because it means you have to rearrange your whole philosophy, your whole way of thinking about what life is. And that's not an easy thing to do. It really isn't.
Well, no. I mean, it then gives you another perspective on, so how many more were true, or I mean, you kept going though. You kept finding evidence.
Well, after you confirm all 28 facts, what can you say? Come on. I wish. Believe me, I had more evidence in this case. I wish I had this kind of evidence in my murder cases. I would love to have this kind of evidence in a murder case, because you got a conviction. That ain't no doubt in your mind. Come on. Every 28 facts. Again, like I said, you could guess things and be right. I mean, for example, I saw him die in a large city. He died in New York City. But at the time when I found that, I tried to write. So I thought, Bob, a lot of people die in big cities. It don't mean anything. Come on, you saw him die. He died in New York City. Okay, that really don't mean anything. A lot of people die. I said he died in the fall. He died in October of 1917. And again, I told myself, Bob, a fourth of people every year die in the fall. And I kept trying to tell myself during this whole thing, whenever I'd find a fact, I tried to rationalize my way out of it. But when I got to the probably the miscarriage and no children and his mother died of a blood clot, I couldn't find any kind of rational way out of that. There isn't one. There's simply the fact is this was James Carroll Beckwith's life that I had viewed during under hypnosis. That's all there was to it.
Mhm. So, what did your wife think of all this?
My wife, because actually during this investigation, one of my biggest admonishments I always gave to my homicide detective was, do not get emotionally involved in your cases. When you get emotionally involved in your cases, you get enough tunnel vision. You're so emotionally involved, you can't see the edges. All you can see is your straight ahead type thing, and you miss important facts. Well, believe me, I knew I was really emotionally involved in this case, and so I went and I told my wife, and I finally told her what I was doing. She thought I was nuts. She really did. It took her a while. She thought I was nuts. But anyway, I kept explaining, so come on, show me what I got and everything. But she really didn't want to believe it, didn't want to see it. So she finally told me, so I'll tell you what, Bob, says, I will investigate Beckwith, and I'll find where you knew this stuff. She is sure there's a book. My wife, incidentally, was also a police detective. She was a child abuse detective and an excellent, very, very, very good detective. I really admired her detective work. She was a very thorough, very good, very excellent detective. So anyway, she told me, no, Bob, you've seen this in a movie, you've seen it in a book. That's all there's to it. I kept trying to tell her, no, there are no movies about Beckwith, no books about him. But she didn't want to hear it, so I'll find it. And I was to tell you the truth, that's kind of what I was hoping for. I was really glad to hear that because I felt like I needed a second outside investigationist, a completely unbiased, third-party investigation of what. Because I thought maybe, Bob, maybe you are emotionally involved in this case, and you need a different viewpoint to find something you haven't seen. Maybe there's something you have seen, but you were so obsessed with this that you didn't see it. So that's a good. So she decided to look at it. So it took her about a month. And she didn't find anything. She found nothing, absolutely nothing I hadn't found. Now, because now she doesn't know what to say. So but she still couldn't accept it. And I can see her point. I mean, come on, I experienced this, not her. So I mean, it'd be a little harder for her to accept it. But I was really glad to find out when she tried that she could not find anything I hadn't already found. There was absolutely nothing. And in the early 1990s, there was simply nothing about Beckwith. No movies, books, or magazine articles. He simply wasn't that. He wasn't that good of an artist. He wasn't that famous an artist. So there would be no reason to have anything, like that about him.
Exactly. So she just decided to just let it go and
Well, no, her problem was she actually advised me. So finally, we were talking one time. After a while, it kind of started upsetting her when I talked about Beckwith. It really did. It really kind of get on her nerve type thing because I don't think she wanted to believe it. Because again, you get it to believe this, you have to change everything you've ever believed in your life, and that's not something you undo readily without a lot of proof. So eventually, I was talking about Beckwith. She said, okay, hold on a second, Bob. So what are you going to say? So what? Okay, so she says, suppose you have proved this. Okie dokie, suppose you have. Suppose it's 100% true. What are you going to do about it? And I told me at the time I really hadn't thought about that, to tell you the truth. She says, what are you going to do with it? And I didn't, at the time I really didn't know. At the time I had no intention at the time of writing a book or even telling anybody about it. And she said, Bob, you need to keep your mouth shut. You need to take this to the grave with you. She said, police captains, do not talk about this. Police captains, you might believe it, that's fine. You do not go publicly espousing this type of belief system. People will think you're nuts. And at that time, I actually kind of agreed with her at the time. But then, like I said, I started doing some research around the police department, some kind of real quiet, research to find out. And I found out that police officers have quite a number of paranormal experiences. And that's what basically decided to make me write the book. Simply because I certainly wasn't the only one.
Oh yeah, no, but you did discover where he was buried too. Yeah, it was.
I felt at the end. I felt this was too important. But to find it, the thing about finding the painting in New Orleans, to me, that's too big a coincidence to be a coincidence. But it's okay because police officers don't like coincidences because in our investigation, you find a coincidence, 99 times 100, it's not really that big a coincidence. It's something somebody made to happen, want to look like a coincidence. Well, but you think about the pregnant woman, if that's true, who made it happen? Okay, who could make that happen? And that kind of thing kind of makes you think, well, this was something you were guided. You were guided to this painting. Somebody wanted you to find this painting. Someone, something, some entity wanted you to find this painting. And so you obviously need to do something with this. This is not something to keep quiet. If it was something to keep quiet, I would never have found the painting. And I thought, and I basically decided it was too important. The things I'd found were simply too important to keep quiet about. And that's why I wrote the book. Now, being a police captain and writing a book, it didn't turn out well. And that's why my wife warned me it would not turn out well. Even my agent, told me that because at the time before this, all my books had been about police work in general, about SWAT teams, self-protection, home protection, and homicide investigation, various things, area police work. My agent told me, he said, Bob, if you do this book, you're going to have a hard time selling another book because they won't take you serious any longer as a police procedure writer if you write a book like this. And, but again, I thought it was simply too important not to. And so I did. And like I said, it didn't go well. It did not go well at the police department. The police department was not amused, to say the least. So, I thought I had to do it.
But anybody who looked at the evidence that you had, you were driven, and I think that's a great part of what you've done. I mean, you really applied your techniques and your skills and your nose for where to go next, and you were able to prove 28. I think you proved 26, and then after the first publication of the book, you were able to prove the last two, I think.
Yeah. The first one, this is actually a second edition. The first edition, I'd only be able to prove 26 of them. But interesting enough, about being a writer, you hear from readers. You hear readers want to contact you about. I had two of my readers who were interested in my story. They did research on the last two, were able to prove the last two for me. So I was actually able to prove all 28. And as a writer, you always feel very good about that your readers felt your book was important enough that they wanted to get involved, that they actually wanted to dig in and help type thing. So actually, two of my readers did a whole lot of research and helped prove the last two facts. I was able to prove all 28.
So from the fact that he carried a walking stick and liked wine, to the fact that they had no children and his mother died of a heart attack, to his death and where he was buried, even I think one of them was the time of his death. One of your readers was able to explain the time of death as to why there was a discrepancy. And I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, as a detective, you don't like facts that you got there's something wrong here with this. For example, I was doing research on Beckwith. One of the books I found that did have reference to him said he died of a suicide. And I thought, wow, I didn't see that anything in my regression. And so I called the New York City medical examiner. At that time, I was the head of the Homicide Branch. So I called him. I said, "This is Captain Snow from Indianapolis, head of homicide." And we talked. And I told him I'm interested in knowing what a man died of. And I gave the man's name, the date. And interesting enough, he didn't ask me why I was interested in somebody died in 1917. But he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll look it up and I'll call you tomorrow." So he called me tomorrow and said, "No, he didn't die. He died of endocarditis." He said which is an infection of the heart valves. And if you look up endocarditis, the symptoms, you can see in Beckwith's diary the last 2 years of his life, he had the symptoms. He died of a heart attack type thing. So again, like that fact, Bobby. Well, there's another fact. According to his death certificate, he died at 5 p.m. in the evening. Okay, in October. Now, even in New York City at 5 p.m., it's not dark because when I passed through the roof after I died, it was dark. It was lights everywhere. It was dark. And I thought, no, there's something wrong, Bob. He died at 5. How can it be dark when you have it dark? So I did some more research back when I got some newspaper articles about his obituary about he died. Well, apparently he went on for a walk in Central Park, and he had a heart attack from the endocarditis, and he caught a cab and brought him home. And he went upstairs to his room and died in his wife's arms, just dropped dead in her arms. Well, she had some kind of bad attack. I guess the shock, it was so great that she had a really, really bad attack, and they had to call a doctor for her, and it was several hours before they could, get her back normalized again. And I was trying to figure out why would Beckwith's soul stay there, and I'm assuming he stayed because he really truly loved Bertha. I think he wanted to stay until he was certain she was okay. and that's why it wasn't. It was a couple hours later before he actually passed through the roof and went, to ready to go to the, into the next life.
Mhm. Wow.
It's again one of the things that the police work. You don't want little gaps. You don't want little gaps in your evidence. You want the evidence. Wait a minute. How could this happen? That's why again you want to fill in all the blanks. This is one of the blanks that I had to fill in.
Well, I think that because of your background, your ability to first isolate those facts that you could prove, hopefully, and then actually go about proving them is something phenomenal. So many people, there are people out there that want to be, Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, and and I don't snicker, but I chuckle.
Yeah, you're right, because there's for every one famous person, there's 10 million people who are not famous. And so everybody,
sure.
I've talked to a lot of people who, since the book come out, people who've been reincarnated, and there's people who are just unsure they were, Abraham Lincoln, or they were George Washington, or they were Napoleon, or what have you. And that, sure, there's probably somebody who was Napoleon, George Washington, but 99.99% of people, your lives are pretty mundane. Your lives are pretty, most of your past lives are pretty mundane. You're just an ordinary person, who were born, got married, had children, worked a farm, or worked somewhere else, and you died, type thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like you. I'm always a little suspicious of people who want to claim. Not to saying it couldn't happen. I mean, they obviously their souls are, the famous people's souls are out there too. But there's not that many famous people compared to the billions of people who are not famous. So the odds of somebody being famous are pretty small.
Well,
pretty small. So I'm always a little suspicious. And see, as a police officer, because interestingly enough, people have always asked me now, well, do you believe in UFO abductions and astrology and all this? No, they can't believe. They have a hard time understanding why. If I could believe in reincarnation, I can't believe in them. And I tell them, if you bring me proof of astrology or UFO abductions, the solid as the proof I have a Beckwith, I will believe in it. But see, again, just because I believe in this, that's the only reason I did it, because I have concrete, solid proof. That's the only reason. The only way I'd accept anything else, anything of these other beliefs, give me some proof, and I will believe it. And that's what basically the only thing. It took a long time for me to accept with life. It took me a couple of years and a lot of research before I did it.
Well, just out of curiosity, now you know that you were a famous, a well-known portrait painter or painter in a past life. Have you at least gotten copies or prints of some of his artwork?
Have I what? Excuse me.
Have you gotten some? Have you gotten some prints or some copies of some of his artwork?
Yeah, I did a lot of research on Beckwith. Actually, his paintings never really have sold well. Interesting enough, they never sell for much. They're not that good. Come on, I mean, to be honest, they're competent. Now, in Beckwith's day, if you wanted a portrait, but you didn't want to pay a whole lot for it, but you wanted a competent portrait, he could do it. The most he ever made his whole life for a portrait was $1,000, and that was one of the Vanderbilts. John Singer Sargent, his good friend and roommate in Paris, had gotten the job of painting a portrait of Vanderbilt. For some reason, I'm not sure why. In those days, whenever you made a portrait of someone, you made two copies. Now, I don't know why, but he always made. So John Sargent talked Vanderbilt into hiring Beckwith to make the copies, and Beckwith got $1,000. That's the most he ever made in his life. So his stuff was not great. His stuff was competent, certainly. If you want to pay, you don't want to pay a lot. And see, that was one of his things that really bugged Beckwith during his life. He wasn't that good. So John Singer Sargent charged $25,000 for his painting. This was back in the late 1800s. That was a huge, huge amount of money. And William Chase, another American painter who's a good friend of his, he charged $10,000 and had people lined up to do it. Beckwith simply he would get usually $600 to $800 for painting. That's all. Because the bottom line was he wasn't as talented as Singer. He wasn't as talented as William Chase. He wasn't as talented as Whistler. He just wasn't that talented. So he couldn't get the money. But for me, it made it better because if I'd have thought I was Van Gogh or Renoir, then you'd say, nah, you saw it in a movie, you read in a book. And that's all there is to it. I mean, there's too many facts about them out in the public domain that you don't know where you could have absorbed them out. There is absolutely nothing about Beckwith out there, nothing.
Well,
and that's what made them more realistic, more believable to me.
he preferred to do landscapes and bright things, and in the one where you looked through the window, it was a very sunny, bright painting you were looking at.
He painted other things. He painted landscapes. He painted other things. He never could make any money off of them, though. He didn't make hardly any money. 99% of his money made as an artist was made doing portraits. Interesting enough, when I was doing the regression with Dr. Griffith, I just blurred out. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm painting a portrait, doing Hunchback Woman." And I told her, "I hate doing portraits. I just hate doing portraits, but I need the money." And funny, Beckwith said that probably 50 times in his diary. He hated doing portraits.
Wow.
He always felt that his real artist skill would be other things than portraits, but he had to do portraits in order to live. In order to make any kind of living, he had to do portraits. But he always wanted to do other things. He wanted to do landscapes. Matter of fact, he did a mural at the World's Fair in Chicago. And they had a lot of people say, I've got pictures of it, that was probably his finest work. But unfortunately, after the World Fair closed, they knocked it all down. But they always thought that was probably his best work. But again, he couldn't sell the other stuff.
Didn't he win prizes and stuff like that for his artwork?
He got some recognition for his work. Yes, he did. But he won some medals and various. I mean, he was a competent painter. He wasn't a slob or a terrible painter or anything. He was his problem is his paintings didn't have the imagination, didn't have the life and vitality that Singer's or Whistler or Monet or somebody else's paintings has. His paintings were very, very realistic. I mean, if you want to portrait yourself, it looked like you. It was very, very realistic, very looked like you. But it didn't have the vitality or life that other painters' paintings had. He wasn't that talented. He simply wasn't as talented as the other people were, and it really bugged him. If you read his diary, he whines. God, he was a terrible whiner in his diary about not having enough, getting recognition, not making enough money, not being able to, sell his other paintings, what have you. But again, I think that was beneficial to me that he wasn't famous, because if he had been famous and there were a number of books by him, you could never really believe 100% that you hadn't seen the information otherwise. The fact there was nothing.
So he was a technician, in other words.
Yeah. The fact that there was nothing about him makes my investigation much more credible. Much more credible.
Well, it made him a technician, and so are you.
Yeah. Again. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, there has to be some sort of a connection to a degree to some aspect of his life that reflects on yours, or there wouldn't have been a point to all of this.
Well, the interesting part is, before I believed in reincarnation, my life looked like a pointless series of events that had no connection at all. I couldn't see any real connection in my life between various events. When I look at it from a reincarnation point of view, everything makes sense. It really does. I mean, the various things happen in my life now all point toward one thing, and that was me writing this book. It really, and see the fact that I become a police officer and a homicide, and the head of the homicide, head of the investigations division, that was important, because this was a tremendously difficult investigation. It really was. It took a lot of detective work, and I don't think a person without the kind of training experience I had, I don't think they could have done it. And I really think that's why it fell to me. I really do. I almost felt like I was chosen, because finding the painting in New Orleans, come on, what's the odds of that really happening? You think the odds are too huge. And that's why I think I was kind of guided to finding the painting, and the fact I had the background and investigation come in tremendously handy, because this was an extremely, extremely difficult case to solve. It really was, and it took an awful lot of meticulous work. For example, read the diaries. It took me over a year to read all 17,000 pages. And the real problem was that Beckwith a lot of times wrote in pencil, light pencil. It was really hard to read, and he scribbled. As a matter of fact, there was one part in his diary where he said that he went back to read the previous year, but he couldn't read his own. He scribbled about it. He couldn't read his own writing. And I believe that was true.
My God. But
the point was, but I studied every page, because I felt there might be something on this page that would be so important you don't want to miss it. So I had to, it took me almost a year of studying every single page of his diary before I could find, so I could make sure that every fact about his life that was recorded was there. Here's enough. A number of people also asked me, well, okay, if Beckwith was so bland and unimportant, Why did he keep his diaries? Why would you want to keep his diaries? And that's a good question. The reason Beckwith they kept Beckwith's diaries is not because nobody really cared about Beckwith. They really did. But Beckwith, during his days in the late 1800s, late 1900s, was a really social butterfly. I mean, he really was. He got around society a lot, and he knew a lot of famous people. He was good friends with like I said, with Theodore Roosevelt. He and Theodore Roosevelt used to go to lunch together. He was good friends with Mark Twain. Him and his wife Beckwith and his wife had a house up in the Catskill Mountains. Well, and his next door neighbor was Mark Twain. When Oscar Wilde, the famous English writer, came to America, he was in America a couple weeks. He stayed with Beckwith in Beckwith's apartment in New York. Beckwith knew Sarah Bernhardt, the actress. He knew William Chase. He knew Sargent. He knew Claude Monet. I mean, and the thing about his diary is full of little anecdotes about these people, about knowing Theodore Roosevelt, about Mark, of course he called him Samuel Clemens, how Samuel Clemens would come to his porch, and he'd tell funny stories all night and all this kind of thing. And interesting, the village they were in the Catskills was a dry village. There was no drinking. Now anybody knows Mark Twain? No, Mark Twain was a drinking man. Well, Beckwith was too. So they used to have these little plays, and they had a little incident where they would sneak out of the play at halftime and go to Beckwith's house and drink. Then come back. Because I had a lady who was writing a book about Mark Twain and knew that I had read the Beckwith diaries. And she contacted me because she said she didn't want to read all 17,000 pages. I wanted to know if I remembered any instance in the diary about Mark Twain. And that's the one I gave her about them sneaking out for the drink during the halftime of the plays. No. But anyway, the point is, he knew everyone. He was, again, he knew Oscar Wilde, like Mark Twain, you name it, Sarah Bernhardt, everyone. And so his diary is just full of little anecdotes about these people, and that's why they kept it. Not because they care. Nobody cares about Beckwith. They really don't. But they do care about it because it's great for you writing a book about one of these people to have these little anecdotes in it. They have little personal anecdotes, particularly anecdotes that maybe nobody else has had before. And that's basically why they kept his diaries.
Well, he adds a richness to stories that is really quite amazing. Now, you've published over 15 books and hundreds of articles.
I need to update my bio. Actually, it's 18. I'm up to 18 books now. So
okay.
I really need to update my bio. Yes, I do. Yeah, I had a book come out last November.
So, are you back to writing about police stuff, or? Yeah.
I'm writing true crime now.
Okay.
I used to write things about police work, about SWAT teams, homicide investigation, sex crime investigation, family abuse. But after a while, you ran out of really interesting subjects about police departments. I mean, you really do. And so I've turned my last 3 books have been all true crime books. That's why I'm working on another true crime book now, simply because true crime has a very good audience. And it's easy to write because you have all the reference material. And again, you have a ready-made audience for your work. So I'm writing mostly true crime now.
So is true crime real cases that you're reporting on, or are the books or stories, are they about crimes that actually were committed?
Yeah. No. Well, yeah. They're crimes that happen in Indianapolis mostly. Simply because I have the locals. When I was in homicide. Naturally, there were a number of cases in homicide. But one of my books, published by Random House, it was a book about there was a murder in Indianapolis in 1971. 3 young businessmen were found in a house in Indianapolis. They were bound and their throats were cut. And they were cut so severely they were practically decapitated. Now,
wow.
So anyway, it got to be a gigantic, and it was a huge press thing in Indianapolis. And the thing was, these 3 men at this time had been starting in the microfilm business. And in 1971, the microfilm business had just started. It was starting big, and these guys had been working for another man. They decided to leave him and start their own business of microfilm. Well, the problem was they sold a number of his customers, a number of his equipment, and all this. And these guys were involved in some bad stuff. They were really involved in some dirty deals. They were dirty deals that people, interesting enough, in 1970, they died in November 1971. In January 1971, they decided to have a contest. The 3 men decided to have a contest to see who could sleep with the most women. And so they actually kept a scorecard in this house on the South Street where they died of the women of each woman he slept with, and they keep a record. And at the end of the year, they'd have to treat the winner to a big dinner. And so when the police found these three guys, now the problem was they had so many suspects. You got all these because the guys, once they accept the one, they jail, they'd go to move to the next one. So you had all these women that were suspects. Their husbands and boyfriends were suspects. The number of their business, rivals were suspects. They had dozens and dozens of suspects. And so in 1971, it's a case it finally just went on the shelf. They couldn't solve it. The problem was every time they could delete one suspect, two more would show up. I mean, these guys were involved in all kind of bad, not just the kind of the sex contest, but they had all kind of bad business deals. They were cheating people and stealing stuff, and so they had tons of enemies. So anyway, the case basically got closed. Well, in 2000, we got a call from a lady down in southern Indiana who claimed she knew who did it. But over the years, we'd had lots of people say that, so I didn't give it much, belief. But I signed one of my detectives to look into it. Well, he was actually able to solve the case. He was actually able to bring the case to closure. And so, At the time of homicide, I knew this was a good case. So I had a copy of the case file and took it home with me. Needless to say, and so all my true crime books are crimes that happened in Indianapolis. Most of them are separate. Two of them are cold cases that were eventually solved, and the last one was about a fraud turned bad that turned into murder type thing. So anyway, it's basically true crime that's happened here that took a lot of detective work to solve. And again, you have a ready-made audience for true crime. A lot of people love true crime, and if told from a police officer point of view, I have a point of view, and I have different contacts that the ordinary crime writer doesn't have. Now I have, the police background, plus I have a lot of contacts in the police department that you're able to get information and insight that your ordinary crime writer doesn't have.
Absolutely. So you did this amazing book on reincarnation, and it slipped in with all of these other books.
This was my only book I wrote that wasn't really about police work itself. There was a lot of police work involved in this, a lot of investigation involved in it.
Absolutely.
This was about 18 books. It's the only one that's really not involved about police work. It really
I know.
is
I find it
one.
so, and it's so strange to see a book on reincarnation in with, mass murders and all sorts of other things. So.
Well. Again, when it happened, it was to me it was just important enough that because let me tell you a couple of things. A couple of times, my wife was death on this. She was death on me writing this book. She thought, Bob, it's going to kill you at the police department. It's going, you don't do this. But and a couple of times, I said, yeah, she's right. I need to do it. But each day, if I did it twice, I decided I'm going to send back the advance. I'm not going to write it. And both times I did it, that very day, something really bizarre would happen. For example, one time I decided, okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to send it back. I'm going to call my agent and tell her to send it back. I'm not going to write the book. Because my agent wasn't real hot on me writing the book either, to tell you the truth. So before I called my agent, I got a call from the Berry Hill Gallery in New York City. Berry Hill Gallery is a very upscale art gallery in New York City. And I didn't realize at this time the art world was pretty small, and people knew what was going on. And I had been contacting a number of art dealers about various things when I was writing the book about Beckwith, and now they about that, but I didn't ever tell anybody why I was writing the book or what the book was about, just the information about Beckwith. So anyway, this researcher from the Berry Hill Gallery called me. He said, "I understand you've been doing research on Beckwith." I said, "Yeah." Well, she said she wanted to know if I knew where any of his paintings were at, that weren't ever for sale, because they were going to have an exhibition of his work. And interestingly enough, the exhibition was going to start the very day my book was scheduled to be released. The very same day. And we didn't know, and the thing, we didn't know about each other. And then I asked her, I says, why would you do an exhibition of Beckwith's work? His work has never sold, never brought any kind of big money in. Why? And, she said, I don't know. It says, somebody came up with it a couple of years ago and we thought it was a good idea. They've been working on this for several years, the same time I was doing something on Beckwith, and we didn't know about each other. And it was opening the very same day my book was coming out. And I thought, at that moment, it's like, gee, it's one of those bizarre things that have you thinking, maybe I'm not supposed to stop writing about. Interesting enough, though, they had the exhibition for 30 days. You know how many paintings they sold? 0.
No, how many?
They didn't sell a single painting. But he's not that.
Did you go?
Yes, I did. Because I wanted to see, because there's some paintings I hadn't seen before, needless to say. So I actually traveled to New York and went to the gallery and saw his paintings. again, they're nice. They're nice, but they're not something that really grabs you. You know what I mean? They're not something you say, "Wow, I gotta have that in my house." They're just not that good. And they didn't sell a single painting during the whole 30 days, not one. Which I thought, boy, that's bizarre.
Was
so anyway,
the Hunchback Woman there? Did you ever locate the Hunchback Woman?
Excuse me?
Did you ever locate the Hunchback Woman?
You know, I never did. Now, I'll tell you a story. I've been finished my story on that one then. Because after I started writing the book, I thought, boy, I need to prove, you know, part of my whole base of the story is a Hunchback Woman painting. I had to be able to prove that it existed. So I actually went back to New Orleans to go to the art gallery. I wasn't still going to buy it at that time, you know. But I wanted at least a photograph or two of it, you know, so I could verify it was really there. So when I got back to New Orleans, I went there, and the art gallery was closed. It had gone out of business.
Oh my!
Well,
gosh.
you know, I thought, but what you do in police work? What you do? You start canvassing other businesses around there. And I started canvassing other art galleries around this one, and I finally found the gallery that had gotten the work there. The guy remembered the painting. Yes, it was the Hunchback Woman painting. I was like, good. That's all I want. I just want a picture if I get it. But I found something really interesting in those days is that art dealers religiously guard the identity of their customers for several reasons. Number one, you don't want to advertise or buy this guy's got, you know, a couple $1 million of artwork in his house. You know, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Number two, they don't want other art dealers to know about them because they'll start trying to push off their art on them. So I said, really, all I want is a picture. He said, no. He said, here. He gave me a little pre-printed card that has my name, address, and phone number. He said, fill this out. I'll send it to the owner. If the owner wants to call you, he will. And so I filled it out. I never heard from him. Never, ever heard from him. So that's why I had to go read the diary and find that in 1912, Beckwith mentions 3 different places about paying the Hunchback Woman to prove it was true. The painting is still out there somewhere, I hope. A lot of Beckwith's paintings were destroyed. People bought them not for the painting, but the frame. Beckwith believed in putting his paintings in very nice, expensive frames. He really did. And a lot of his paintings were probably painted over and used for another painting. They just simply, you know, because after he died, his wife sold. He had dozens of paintings left in his gallery, and she sold them. She sold them for practically nothing. She, of course, you know, she had no more source of income, and so she sold dozens of paintings for. She didn't really get very much money for them. So I feared an awful lot of his paintings have been, you know, they took the frame and threw the painting away, or they painted over the canvas and put a new painting on top of it. And I hope that Hunchback Woman is still around somewhere, but somebody obviously wanted. They paid, you know, I don't think they paid the $5,000 because again you can bargain, but somebody paid money for it. So I hope it's still there. But I've never heard of it. I've always watched I keep an eye on different websites and everything about Beckwith's paintings. I never have seen it come up. Never have seen it. So it's obviously still in a private collection somewhere.
Now when he was young, was crippled a number of times with rheumatism or arthritis. I can't remember which.
It was rheumatism, yes.
Rheumatism.
That was one of the reasons. That was one of the reasons that Dad finally let him become an artist, because he was not healthy enough to actually work. Dad was a wholesale grocer. Wanted him to. He had a couple other brothers, and they did go into business with their dad. But Beckwith was never healthy enough. He was actually confined to a wheelchair for a while. And they say in various places for different kind of cures and all that. But and eventually his dad finally relented and let him attend art school in Chicago simply because he was not healthy enough to do other work. But he was never terribly healthy. I mean, the rheumatism bothered him his whole life. It didn't cripple him after like it did in his youth, but he had those problems with it most of his life.
And you're very healthy, right? No problems in that area at all. Knock on wood.
Yeah, let me tell you about one more incident. I was told this was another bizarre incident that happened. Another time, again, I had somehow, I don't know how, this lady found out I was writing a book about reincarnation, and she was an astrologer. Okay. And while I was writing, I'm not sure how she found out. Anyway, she contacted me. Says, "Do you read Beckwith's diaries? Do you know when he was born?" I said, yeah, because he says in his autobiography that he was born at 9 o'clock in the morning while his dad was out hunting with a friend. She said, good. So I knew he was born September 23rd, 1852 at 9 in the morning. She said, good. When were you born? I want to run a comparative astrology chart. on you.
Oh, what a great idea.
And I thought it was kind of foolish at the time. Come on. I don't really believe in astrology. I still don't because you haven't proved it to me. So, but the lady was nice and polite, and I thought, okay, I mean, how hard is it me to go at my birth certificate out and find when I was born, you know? So I said, okay. But then I found out, interestingly enough, my birth certificate doesn't have a time on it. It tells a date. But also I thought, so I had to figure out how am I going to find what time I was born. But even when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, is this the kind of people I really want to be associated with? People who believe in astrology. And again, I decided at that moment, I'm not going to write this book. I'll find out when I was born for this lady, okay. But I don't really want to be associated. Do I really want to be grouped into these kind of people? Because again, I didn't give astrology much belief. So I finally wanted. There's only one person left in my family who's still alive who knew when I was born. It's my aunt. She's the only one still around. Everybody else is gone. So I called my aunt and I say, I need to know. Do you know what time of day I was born? And she says, yeah, you was born about 9 o'clock. Your dad was out hunting with your uncle. And, at that moment, it's like, I thought, after considering Beckwith said he was born 9 in the morning while his dad was out hunting with a friend, and I was born 9 in the morning when my dad was out hunting with my uncle. And it just caught me so stunned at that moment. It's like, holy smoke. Again, it's a message. I'm not real, not that dense. You can pick up a message that apparently this book is going to be written. This book needs to be written. Because, again, these are all coincidences. But and to think about all these coincidences that happen, one coincidence by itself I could accept. You could. It's just a bizarre coincidence. You accept it, okay. Because coincidences, police officers don't like them. Occasionally they do happen. But you don't have dozens. I mean, believe me, during the writing of this book, I had dozens. Not just these two I mentioned. I had dozens of coincidences, a little bizarre coincidence. Each one by itself, just a little bizarre coincidence. That nothing, if it's by itself alone, you would think nothing of it. But when you group them together, it's too many. It's way too many. It's like, whoa, come on. How many can happen? And you realize there's a message here that I'm supposed to write this book. And that's why basically one of the reasons I did it, even over my wife and my agent's objection. And unfortunately, both my wife and my agent were correct. It didn't turn out well at the police department. It didn't turn out well for my writing. It took me 5 years after Beckwith come out before I could get another book published. It simply, the publishers did not take me serious again as a police procedural writer. They simply didn't because of the book on Beckwith. I mean, and as just an agent said, it took 5 years. But after, if enough time passes, people forget everything. And I eventually did get back into writing. At the police department, it did not go well at all. This is not something a police captain publicly espouses. It simply isn't. Because a lot of the people there thought I was off my rocker. And basically, what happened, they tried to force me to retire. Now, of course, I'm civil service. You can't make me retire. Nobody can do that.
Right.
But what they did, I was in homicide at the time, a commander of homicide. And again, we had an amazing low homicide rate and an amazing high clearance at the time. And they took me out of homicide, replaced me, and put me down to the citizen service desk. Citizen service desk where people come in to get police reports, get fingerprinted for jobs, what have you. It's basically a job where captains serve who are getting ready to retire. And if you got like 4 or 5 months left before you retire, they put you there just before you retire. And that was the message I was supposed to get. Because interestingly enough, I'd been a captain for a long time on the police department. I was a captain for over 20 years. And I had helped a lot of young officers coming up into the department. I had helped them into their careers and helped them do stuff. I'd always been good to everybody who worked for me, helped them. And so by the time, I had 2/3 of the chief staff, the executive staff had worked for me at one time. And so I had several sources inside the chief staff tell me what was going on and tell me that the message I was supposed to get from this transfer is I was supposed to retire. Now, I didn't. I did retire eventually, but not right away. I'm too hard-headed. I'm too obnoxious and hard-headed. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't retire right away. But they were trying to force me. They were trying to put me in one crummy job after another until I would find that I would leave. But again, I really couldn't be surprised. My wife had warned me, and I knew too that this would not go well at the police department, and it didn't. It didn't go well.
But you really didn't have a choice, did you?
No, I really didn't. I really didn't. Too many things fell into place. Too many things when I was researching this book and writing this book and researching it. Too many things fell into place. Occasionally, I would have information actually about Beckwith dumped in my lap from places you wouldn't know. For example, after the Hunchback Woman was disappeared, I couldn't find it. The painting. I was calling art dealers around to see if they knew, who, maybe they knew who had it. Maybe, because sometimes what's in somebody's collection, type thing. Maybe they knew who had it. So I talked to this one gentleman, He's an art dealer in upstate New York. He was an owner of an art gallery. He said, I don't. He said, but I tell you what. He said, I have an expert on American art I used. He said, I won't buy any American art until she authenticates it. Apparently, I didn't realize that. Apparently, there's a lot of forgery in American art, and so she had to authenticate it. He says, when I have her call you. I said, well, okay, would you? But so anyway, while I was researching Beckwith during his diaries, he mentions, 100 times at least, how he's working on his scrapbooks, how he's working. Tonight I'd work 2 hours on my scrapbook type thing. I could not find out where these scrapbooks are at. There was no information. I could not find where they're at. So anyway, this expert, this art dealer called me about, and I told her I'm looking for the painting by James Carroll Beckwith of the Hunchback Woman, type thing. And she, of course, she didn't know about it. She didn't know about it anyway. And just out of the blue, I didn't ask her anything out of the blue. She said, that his scrapbooks are at the Historical Society of New York City, don't you? And just come out of the blue. I was like, no, I didn't. So I actually went to New York to look at them too, needless to say, because I wanted to. You don't want to. If you're a police officer, even if you got a case solved, you got this case, you got it pinned down. If there's other evidence, you got to look at it. You just do. You can't. You can't let evidence, because who knows what it'll say. It might go against what you find. So anyway, I went to New York, and actually, I didn't really find anything in his scrapbooks that would go against anything I'd said. The only thing, the really interesting part about the scrapbooks, he had a lot of pictures in there of people that he talked about in his diary, so I could see who the people were he talked about a lot. I might tell you something else about New York also. So that was part of my research. I went to New York not only to look at for the scrapbooks, but I also went there to see if I could find any places Beckwith had been. He had various addresses in New York, and there was nothing. All the places, everywhere he had been, had since. Of course, he died in 1917, and so all the places he had visited were gone. There are new buildings there, new skyscrapers. But I had noticed on his death certificate, the medical exam from New York City had sent me, so I could prove he wasn't a suicide. He died. It said he was buried in Kensico Cemetery, which is in Valhalla, New York, which is a suburb north of New York City. And now, the whole time I'm there doing research on Beckwith, I'm thinking, how cool would it be to go visit your own grave? I mean, come on. How many people in this life ever get a chance to go visit their own grave?
Not a lot.
but tell me, it was a little bit frightening, a little bit scary too. I know it shouldn't have been scary because you think, come on, Bob, what the heck? There could be a ghost of spirit there because it's inside you. So I find I'm gonna go to Kensico Cemetery, and so I went. So the last day in New York, after I had finished up the Historical Society and hadn't found any of the buildings, I got on a train. I went to the Grand Central Station, got on a train, took it to Valhalla, New York, to go to visit Kensico Cemetery. And Kensico Cemetery, by the way, is a beautiful, but it's a huge, huge cemetery, a beautiful cemetery. A lot of the elite of society in New York during the 1800s and early 1900s were buried in Kensico Cemetery. There's just tons of big, beautiful mausoleums and stuff. So anyway, I went to the office and told them who I was looking for, and they made a map. They showed me a map of where Beckwith was. And it was a beautiful day, so I just decided to walk over there. They offered to give me a ride, but I decided I wanted to walk and kind of look over the graveyard. So I walked over it, and his grave was at the far end of the cemetery at the top of the hill. And so I went up there, and then sure enough, there was, I got the map. Okay, it's right over here. And interestingly enough, I found as I walked toward the grave, I started having an anxiety attack, and it was a really serious anxiety attack. When I first became a police officer, when I was a rookie, and in my first couple of years, you'd have these kind of things of, okay, you got to run. There's a guy inside this house with a gun. He's shot at a couple of people. You got to go get him. Don't kid yourself. That give you a little anxiety attack. And I used to have, the thing where you'd feel electricity in your hands, you'd feel your heart palpitating, and I always had a feeling my left knee would always start shaking. Or I haven't had any kind of nervous thing, my left knees are shaking. And that's what happens. I walked toward the grave. I could feel my heart palpitating. I was starting to sweat, and my left knee started to shake. And I'm thinking to myself, Bob, this is stupid. There's nothing in this grave but a corpse. Any spirit that was in this body, there can't be any ghosts or any spirits here. Any spirits in his body is in you. And I kept trying to tell myself this. I kept telling Bob, this is stupid, but I could not stop it. I had this. I could just be shaking. My hands were shaking. I was sweating. My knee was just going like crazy, and I simply could not stop it as I was looking at the grave. But while I was there, I wanted to get a picture of the grave. to prove it. To number one, to prove myself, I wasn't scared. So I left the grave for a minute. And it's funny, as I got about maybe 10, 15 away, it all went away. The anxiety attack went away. It didn't bother me again. So I found some people working in the grave, or a couple of maintenance people working there, and I asked one of the guys, "Would you take a picture of me at the grave?" And all that. And it turned out, actually, I put that in my original. The first edition book has a picture of me at the grave there. A picture of me standing back at his grave. Anyway, so I went back, and I was, guys, I'll go back. When I get within, maybe 10, 15 feet of the grave, the anxiety starts again. I start sweating. My knee is shaking. My hands are full of electricity. I don't know what it was. And so anyway, I said, "Can I take a picture of me?" And of course, it seemed like it took forever to focus the thing. I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to look calm and very collected and very confident. And inside, I'm ready to fall apart. And I have no idea. Finally, I took the picture, and I went and grabbed the camera and left. And I have a lot of people tell me different theories of why this happened. I have no idea, other than apparently you're not supposed to visit your grave. Apparently, that's not something you're supposed to do. Why, I have no idea. But apparently, it's not something you're supposed to do. Probably because you have
an anxiety attack.
I have no idea. I mean, I couldn't rationalize myself, reason why. Why would I have an anxiety? Why? I mean, all it is simply a gravestone and a corpse down there, and so why would that give you? I couldn't understand. Why would they give you anxiety? I've had a lot of people over the years give me explanations for it, but I cannot think of a reason why it happened, other than the fact I'm guessing you're not supposed to visit your grave. That is apparently a no-no.
Well, in all of my experience in this field, and I've been in this field for over 50 years, I've never heard that it was a no-no. It probably maybe was bringing it full circle to you that this was a reality, and that could be a tad upsetting.
I've had a lot of people talk to it. I've had people do that. Interesting enough, I've also had a lot of people over the years want to give alternate explanations for what happened about Beckwith, that it wasn't a reincarnation, that it was something else. But and the only point is, some people told me, no, your mind left your body and went to this great library in another dimension, and you pulled a book off the shelf and had me Beckwith. This type, there's different things. I've had other people tell me the devil. They actually, when I was in hypnosis, the devil entered my body and the devil made me see it, type thing, and various things. I've had people offer all kind of explanations, but police officers believe in a thing called Occam's razor. Occam's razor says the simplest explanation is usually the right one. We really do believe in that. But anytime you have a real elaborate explanation for something, it's usually not true. The simplest explanation is almost always the right one. And to me, the simplest explanation is this: I have Beckwith's memories in my subconscious mind, and when I was hypnotized, they simply came out. That's all there is to it. Even, like I said, again, a lot of people give me a lot of, but nobody's ever gave me one that was even close to being simple. It's always these big, elaborate ones. Like I said, demons possessing me, and like I said, going to other dimensions and various things. But I think the simplest explanation is simply these memories are in my mind, and I was able to access them. In hypnosis, you can access your subconscious mind, where you can't normally do that, but you can in hypnosis. And that, to me, that was the explanation for it.
Well, I think that one of the best ways of proving incarnation is to convert a skeptic, and it certainly happened here. And what a wonderful way of validating that it's true. Excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze here. That reincarnation is valid. I mean, here you had a trained detective investigating something, trying to prove that it wasn't, and all you did was prove that there is reincarnation.
Well, a lot of times in police work, believe me, in most homicide cases, most of my detectives go into cases, you're pretty sure what happened. You know that A did it, and your whole drive then of your investigation is to prove it. But sometimes you're going to a case and you're trying to get this image, you realize, hang on, I'm going the wrong way. This ain't so. A didn't do it, B did. You have to turn around. Well, that's what happened in this case. My whole intent, the investigation, was to prove it wrong, to prove there was no such thing. Because the problem is, to prove it, you have to change your whole life. You have to change everything about your life, about your whole worldview, everything you thought, how things happen. You have to change it. Now, I certainly wasn't willing to do that unless I had, ironclad evidence, and that's why I kept looking for the one disproving fact. If I could have found one thing about my regression and Beckwith's life that weren't true, that would have been good. Then I could have said, nah, there's something fishy, something's not true. This is not a real memory, because you wouldn't say that we didn't have kids. My wife had kids because you couldn't have kids. If you really had kids, if you really did have kids, you couldn't say that because it wouldn't be a real regression. And that's what I was looking for, but I couldn't find it. It never showed up. But again, the problem was I wanted to disprove it because, hey, man, come on, this is not something you don't really want to believe in these kind of things. But again, this is not something that average police officer believes in unless you had solid, rock-hard evidence, which I did finally. I had to get solid, concrete evidence before I would accept it.
Well, I think one of the greatest things about this is, you went through this 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was. You wrote the book, you published the book, and you got back to your work. And it was almost as though, you had to write this book before you were going to go back to what you were comfortable with and what you enjoyed doing and stuff like that. I mean, this was an obsession. And
it was. Interesting enough. I told you I had all kind of little bizarre coincidences, like the birthday, this kind. I had dozens of these little bizarre coincidences happen. Interesting enough, once the book was published, it's like a door slammed shut. Nothing. I have had nothing since. Absolutely nothing. It was all of them stopped. All the little coincidences, all the little information, all the little things. Every little thing stopped. It's like a door slammed shut. Once the book was published, I feel like, well, I guess I did what I was supposed to do. I've done it because again, I would always have these little things that little pop up and you say, "Oh, that's odd, that's strange." But again, by itself being nothing, but this is the 35th little coincidence type thing. You think, but once the book was published, that was it. They stopped completely, and they have ever since. So I'm assuming.
I think it was important that you write this book because it does validate it. It shows an investigation that absolutely proved this, that in your case especially, reincarnation does exist. And the fact that you didn't turn into a New Age woo-woo person is even better. Because, if you had decided to ride this train, and go into the New Age stuff and all of that, it would have in many ways diminished the authenticity of what you did.
Well, again, I've had a number of people who simply cannot believe that I'm not a believer in astrology and crystal power and all this kind of things. But my point being, well, give me the same amount of proof, and I will. If you could give me the same kind of proof that I have about Beckwith about astrology, then I will believe in it. But they don't. Nobody has that kind of proof. It's simply not available. And so I don't believe in it. I'm not going to. Again, believe me, it took me dragging me screaming and kicking to get me to believe in reincarnation. It wasn't an easy thing to do. I was fingernails on the floor being drugged into believing this because I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. My life as a police captain was great. It was all very rock solid, very very, very good. I was on a really upward mobility path in the police department at that time. Being the head of Homicide Branch is probably the most prestigious position in the police department, the head of the homicide. It really is. So I was really on an upward mobile path before this come along. And needless to say, after writing this book, I took a serious nosedive. My career basically was over. As a police, it was basically over type thing. But again, I don't regret any of it. I really don't, because I felt like it was a story. It was just simply too important not to be told. It's too many things happened that I thought the story just needed to be told. And regardless of what it does to me, what happened to me, that's not really as important as to pass along this information for people. It really wasn't. So you just let it go. Don't worry about it. What happened.
Well, in many cases, when people tell you about their past lives, usually they're so far back they can't be researched or looked into, and it does make it hard to actually believe in reincarnation. I mean, to really concretely believe in it, you've got one of the best examples I have ever seen of reincarnation. And what's great is, while you believe it, you probably will play I doubt it with other people to a certain extent, unless they've gone through the same kind of process that you have in order to really prove that they know who they were. Like I said, there are lots of Cleopatras and Julius Caesars out there, and
yeah,
Henry VIII.
During my time when I wrote this book, I've given a number of talks. I've been to various conferences. People invited me to various conferences, and I met a lot of other people who claim that that they know what their past life was. But I never had anybody have any real kind of proof. Because there are people. For example, one gentleman, he believes that he was a Civil War general because he went to this battlefield and he felt this this feeling of belonging there. And he got a picture of the Civil War general who's in charge there, and he does look like him. I mean, he does. I mean, he looks a bit like him. But is that proof? Is that really proof? See, there's my problem. Is I've never ever talked to anyone who had proof. I mean, I'm talking proof you can present in court. This is you could say, Judge, here it is, and it'd be accepted in court as evidence. I have never ever talked to anyone yet who had that kind of evidence that couldn't be explained other ways. In other words, because there's also a number of people who have claimed things, and later on you find out that it wasn't really true type thing. I mean, it's where people have made up stuff and what have you. And so believe me, when anybody tells me they've proven a past life, as hard as it was for me to do it, I'm very skeptical, because usually people will accept just one piece of proof, one or two pieces of proof. For example, this person looks like him, and I'll admit he does look like this general. He does, but is that proof? I mean, because I would think if you looked enough old photographs, you could find it look like you could find somebody you look like, if you look long and hard enough. And I mean, I admit that's interesting, but is that proof? I don't consider that proof enough that I would say, yep, this is a proven case of reincarnation. I just don't. I mean, to me, you have to have much more proof. Excuse me?
Have you seen a picture of Beckwith? Do you?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, of course I have.
I would imagine you don't resemble him.
People say that. I don't see that. People told me that I look like that. I don't see it. Now, maybe, I don't know. Of course, you really can't see yourself how other people see you. Of course, you see yourself from your eyes inside. People have told me that, and there's even a gentleman who I've had a number of dealings at conferences and everything, who claims that you do carry similarities over from life to life. He claimed that it's in the DNA you carry over physical resemblances and things from previous lives. But I don't know. I can't see the resemblance to me and Beckwith. Other people say they can. I don't know. It doesn't look like to me. But then again, I can't see myself as out from the outside. Everybody else sees me, so I really can't say for sure. And my point being, I've had a number of people would say that we were saying, "Well, do you have any artistic ability?" And I really don't. Matter of fact, I was a summa cum laude graduate from college, and I got straight A's in high school and most of my grade school days. Only one time I ever got an F in any subject matter, and that was an art class. That's the only time I ever got an F my whole life. But you think about it. People ask me, "Well, don't you have artistic abilities?" But you think about it. Why would you? I mean, you've already done that. I mean, think about it. You've already done that. Yeah. Why would you want to carry it over to the next life? But a number of people are convinced you do carry it over. But I never could see why would you? Why would you carry it over? You've done that in that life. You've done it. Why do it again? Why repeat it again? Why wouldn't you go for something new?
Well, there are, for instance, children who come, at the age of 3 and 4 are accomplished pianists and things like that, and they do say that is carryover from a past life, and I would almost have to believe that it was. But no, you have very good points here, and what I love is you have this book on reincarnation mixed in with all of these other detective things and police matters and things like that. I think that it's a book that I would encourage everybody to pick up a copy of it and read it, because throughout the entire book you keep trying to prove something isn't, and all you do is manage to prove that without a doubt it is, which is so cool.
And again, like I said, occasionally in police work that happens. You're going for A and it turns out to be B, and that's what happened in this case. I was really dead set on proving this wasn't so, but eventually you run and realize I'm heading the wrong direction. Eventually, like I said, after the facts kept accumulating, you'd find, because I had 28, and you find you have to get 10 or 12. You're thinking, come on. But I kept rationalizing the whole way about, okay, so what? That don't prove anything. I kept trying to find one rationalization after another. But after a while, especially when about the no children and the mother dying of blood clot, as I said, you have to face the fact you're heading the wrong direction, Bob. You turn around.
Well,
it is true.
And every time you came close to stopping, something fell in your lap that kept you going, which was amazing.
Yeah, something slapped me upside the head and told me to turn around. You're going to do it anyway. But in a way, though, this to me, reincarnation is a much easier belief system than others because you always find it hard to understand if you only have one life. Okay, if you only get one shot, why do bad things happen to good people and good things to bad people? Does that make any sense to any kind of universe? Why would bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? It doesn't make any sense. Or why, if you only got one life and you believe there's somebody controlling the universe, and there obviously is, but you believe this person controlling the universe, why would you get a person on one life and kill them when they're a baby or kill them when they're a young child? What would be the point? If you only got one life, what would be the point of killing a 1 or 2 year old? That happens, more than people like to think. Why would that happen? Why would that happen if you only got one life? Whereas if you look in the reincarnation viewpoint, it's just one blip. It's just one blip, and maybe it's meant to help somebody else adjust something in their life. I mean, you live till 2 years old and die. And maybe it's meant to have your parents learn how to deal with this, but it's not a big deal because this is just one of maybe hundreds and hundreds of lives. So it's not a big deal. And the thing is, people always think about how come some people have it easy and some people have it hard. But the thing about reincarnation is that everybody gets the different shots. I mean, one life you might be an untouchable in Calcutta, and the next life you're a Donald Trump type. I mean, each life everybody gets their shot at each of them. Beckwith himself had a very comfortable life. He really did. He didn't really have too much bad happen to him. He had a pretty comfortable life, and I think he was always God. You listen to his diaries. He was like I said, he was a crybaby. He was always complaining about money, but actually at the end of his life, he was pretty well off financially. He wasn't really that bad off financially. Him and his wife, did fairly well type thing. But the thing is, again, if you believe in reincarnation. Even if you have a bad life, this one, the next life, they're going to be different. You're going to experience different things in different lives. And so, my point is, in reincarnation, life is fair. Because if you just look at things of one life, if you think you only have one life, there's no other life, just this one. Life is really unfair. I mean, like I said, bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. But if you look from a reincarnation viewpoint, life is very fair. Because sure, you bad things might happen to you in this life, really bad things. But next life, you have all kind of good things happen to you. It evens itself out. And it also helped me a little bit in my homicide because a lot of times in homicide, you see young people snuffed out. I mean, these kids are maybe just teenagers or preteens. And you think, you go to the scene, they're laying there dead, and you're thinking, what was the point? What was the point of this person's life? If you only lived to be 15 years old, you never really experienced anything or did anything, you never really contributed anything or anything, what was your point? But if you believe in the reincarnation viewpoint, you realize this is just one little blip on a lifetime on a scale of hundreds of lives. So it doesn't really mean it's not really unfair. The life isn't that unfair. Life is actually very fair. It's just your next life you might live to be 90 years old. Who knows? Type thing. That's why to me it's a much easier to now that I believe in reincarnation. It's easier. You feel better about the world. You do feel better about the world because you realize that overall life is actually fair. It really is. Life is fair. Everybody gets the same chances, just different lifetimes.
So it really has changed your philosophy of life. Exactly.
I do have, and it took me a long time to actually erase my prior beliefs and put these in. It's a harder thing you do, hard thing you think, to just completely erase all your previous beliefs system and replace it with a brand new one, especially after living your whole life with the belief system. That was to me the hardest thing about the Beckwith experiences. Not so much accepting it or proving it, as actually applying it to my life, where I could actually just basically erase my previous belief system and replace it with a new one. But I like the new one. To me, the new one is much easier to live with because I realize, number one, that life is fair after all, and number two, if people die and you're really always sad about it, but they don't really die. They'll come back. Maybe not. You'll never see them again, but they'll come back eventually somewhere else. to me, that's a reassuring feeling too.
It really is, and in your line of work, I would imagine it changed a lot. Are you still friends with a lot of the people that you worked with?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, it seems you had 38 years. 38 years.
38 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, but it was great. It was like I said again. I never want to be a police officer, but it was great because I got a lot, tons. I got enough material to last me a lifetime to write about, and that's all really I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer, and that's again part of my thing. I think why I was guided to write this book. Not only was I guided to be a police officer, because whoever writes this book, you had to have a tremendous amount of investigative skills, but you also had to know how to write. You had to write. This was not my first book. This was, I'd already written over 100. I had over 100 articles of short stories published in various magazines, and I had written. I think this was my sixth book. So it wasn't like I didn't have any experience. To me, this was all a guided thing, where whoever runs the universe needed somebody who was a detective and could write. And I basically that's why I was apparently selected to do this, because I do feel like I was selected, because when I look at my life now, everything seems to fit into place and pushing me toward this one end of writing this book. For example, my whole life I've always been an overachiever. Always, my whole life I've always been a really big overachiever, and that's really important for a writer. You cannot be a successful writer without being an overachiever, because writing, particularly when you first start, is a tremendously discouraging profession. I mean, you really meet a lot of rejection, a lot of discouragement, and so you have to be an overachiever. You really do. That overachievers never give up. They just stick with it until they finally conquer it. And that's what I did. And if I really think if I hadn't been an overachiever, I'd have given up writing probably years ago, because it's really discouraging at times. It's great at times when you get things done, but for everything I've got published, I've got at least 100 different rejections on other things. It's something you have to learn to live with as a writer. But being an overachiever, you don't let that bother you. And that's why I look back at my life now and I see everything that happened to me to make me an overachiever and to make me a writer and a police officer. Everything was kind of guided. It really was. I fell into a lot of things that turned out to be necessary.
We are almost out of time here, and I do want to thank you so very, very much. I do want to remind people that the name of your book is
Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic.
Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, and it was a fabulous book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the way you wove your skepticism in and how it was hammered away so beautifully throughout the entire book. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show tonight and sharing your story. And
thank you for inviting me.
highly recommend people. Oh, my pleasure, and I have my friend Chris at Curious Times to thank as well for suggesting you, because frankly, I'm not so much into police books, so I probably wouldn't have found your book had it not been for her. But I do appreciate it. I do appreciate your spending the time to explain your story, because it's fascinating, and you are obviously a convert, and it's fabulous. So thank you so very much for being on Nightlight with us tonight.
Well, thank your friend for recommending me, and tell me I really appreciate it.
I will do that absolutely. Thanks a lot now, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to talking to you next week. And have a good night, have a good week, and do some reading. It's a great way to educate yourself and might even drop some of your skepticism. Good night now.